My husband of 7 years ended our marriage because a psychic in a converted storage unit told him I was blocking his destiny, and then he actually tried to sue me for emotional damages over it. I never thought I would be typing that sentence in my life, but here we are. I am 32, my now ex-husband is 34, I will call him Damon. We live in one of those medium-sized towns where the biggest local drama is when someone suggests changing the bus routes. We met in a night class on digital illustration at an adult learning center that is inside what used to be a break room in an old plant, buzzing fluorescent lights, dented tables, computers that sound like they are about to take off. He sat at the back, cracking jokes about how the drawing tablet lag was building character. He was funny in a way that made the whole room loosen up. Back then he was very practical. He worked in logistics for a regional warehouse supplier. He liked schedules, color-coded spreadsheets, clear answers. His idea of spirituality was rolling his eyes at horoscope memes. I am the artsy one. I do freelance pattern design from home. I like weird color combos and I read horoscopes the way people read comic strips, just as a little extra. We balanced each other out. Or at least that is what I thought. The whole psychic thing did not exist in our relationship for years. We moved in together. We saved. We eventually had a small wedding at a community hall by the river pumping station. Nothing fancy, just neighbors and some fairy lights. We argued about normal stuff, chores, money, whose turn it was to deal with the noisy radiator in the bedroom. Nothing that screamed future court battle over destiny. A couple of years ago, his job changed. His company reorganized. Suddenly he had a new manager half his age and he got passed over for a promotion he had basically built his whole identity around. He went from stable and mildly grumpy to restless and kind of obsessed with the idea that his life was supposed to be more. He kept saying he was stuck, invisible, that other people had some secret cheat code he did not. One weekend a friend invited him to a wellness fair in an old tram depot, not a park. This is one of those long brick sheds where they used to roll trams in. Now they rent it out for random events, yoga booths, handmade soap, all of that. I did not go because I had a rush job. He came home later with a paper bag full of little flyers and this look on his face like he had just discovered a new hobby and a new religion at the same time. He dropped the cards on our dining table, which is also my work table, and started telling me about this woman in a tiny corner booth, lots of fabric, candles, the whole thing. Apparently she looked at him for about 30 seconds and told him he was in the wrong career, that his energy was built for leading, not supporting, and that there was a huge block around him. I joked that the block was probably our electricity bill. He did not laugh. That was probably the first red flag. Her card said her name was Solara, and she called herself an intuitive guide for life path alignment. Damon booked a full session with her later that week. Her main space was this narrow room above a nail salon, the kind of place where you can hear the blow dryers from downstairs through the floor. He came back with a notebook full of scribbles and this faraway look. He told me she had confirmed everything he already felt, that he was meant for something bigger, that his path was tangled up because of people close to him who were afraid of change. At first it was just strange little changes. He started moving furniture around because she told him his bed needed to face a certain direction. He put dishes of salt in the apartment corners. He set alarms on his phone to remind him to repeat affirmations about abundance. It looked ridiculous to me, but I honestly thought it was harmless. I rolled my eyes in private and figured this was his version of buying a motorcycle. At least this one did not have a monthly payment, or so I thought. The money drain started slowly. There were random transfers on our joint account that looked like normal spending at first glance. Nothing huge. Then one day I tried to pay the internet bill and the main checking account was way lower than it should have been. I went through the history and saw repeated transfers to an account name I did not recognize. When I brought it up, he got defensive, then admitted he had signed up for some package with Solara, like coaching, multiple sessions, a couple of special ceremonies, all bundled. He described it the way people describe online courses, but the amounts were not tiny. We have always had an agreement that anything recurring or over a certain number gets talked about first, so I reminded him of that. He waved it off and told me I was thinking too small, that this was an investment, that once he got himself aligned, we would benefit. He even said this might finally push my own work into the next level, because my energy would ride his wave. He has never spoken like that in his life. Hearing him talk about my freelance business like some hitchhiker on his spiritual highway made me angry in a way I did not know what to do with. I asked to see the paperwork. He kept avoiding it, said I would just mock it. Eventually, when he was in the shower, I went into the drawer where he keeps random mail and found a thin folder tucked under old flyers. Inside was a contract printed on slightly fancier paper. Lots of airy language about commitment to growth and energetic exchange. No refunds under any circumstances. Session fees that added up to more than our car is worth. It was not illegal looking, just very one-sided. We had a fight in the kitchen after that, me standing by the sink with the water running just to have something to do, him leaning on the counter with his arms crossed. I told him paying someone this much money to tell him he was special felt like a scam. He told me I was attacking his beliefs, that she was helping him see his potential. He repeated a line about how partners often resist when one person starts growing. It sounded rehearsed, like he was quoting a script. The first time he used the phrase blocking my destiny was in our tiny laundry alcove. I was trying to untangle a wet duvet cover. He stood in the doorway and told me very calmly that Solara had done a deep dive session and my energy came up as a main blockage. He explained, like he was reading a weather report, that my fear of change, my constant focus on practical things, my habit of making jokes when he talked about his sessions, all of that was tying him to a lower timeline. Hearing my personality described like bad software dragging down his system made my brain short out for a second. I asked him if he actually believed a stranger who had known him for a few months understood our marriage better than we did. He said it was not about understanding, it was about seeing patterns from above. He kept using this phrase my old self, like we had already broken up and I just had not been told yet. After that conversation, he changed things quickly. He stopped sleeping in our bed. At first he said it was because he was having vivid dreams after sessions and did not want to wake me. Then it shifted to he slept better on the couch without my restless energy near him. He hung a fabric somewhere above the doorframe and said it was to filter the air. He started spending more and more time at Solara's room above the nail salon. Group circles, private work, all of that. He would come home smelling like incense, buzzing, talking about cutting cords and past lives. I tried one time to show up to a group thing with him, not to join, just to see what it was. He had mentioned it was open. I climbed the narrow stairs above the salon. The hallway smelled like nail polish remover and smoke. There was a hand-painted sign with her name and a big eye on it. I knocked. She opened the door a sliver, saw me, and said the circle was already sealed and outside energy could not enter. Damon appeared behind her looking guilty and asked if we could talk later, like I was a neighbor dropping by unannounced. It was obvious they were united against me on this. She closed the door gently while I was still trying to process that I, his actual wife, was now considered outside energy in his safe space. The practical side of life started suffering. He kept skipping overtime to go to sessions, which meant less income from his job. He got written up once for missing a mandatory meeting because he was at an activation circle. He came home annoyed that his manager did not understand that this was important. I reminded him that his job paid for our rent, not his readings. He told me money was just energy and if we stopped panicking about it, more would flow. I asked him if the electricity company accepted energy or if they still preferred numbers on a bill. He did not appreciate that. The big blow-up came over, of course, an actual bill. The electricity company sent a notice that we were behind. I put it right on top of his little stack of affirmation cards on the coffee table. When he got home and sat down to watch some video Solara had recommended, I asked him to look at the notice with me. He kept staring at his screen. I reached over and slowly closed the device so he had to look up. He snapped, loudly enough that our downstairs neighbor banged on their ceiling with something. He accused me of constantly dragging him back to fear, of refusing to trust that things would work out. He said he felt lighter whenever he was away from me, that when he left the apartment his chest loosened, that being around people who believed in him felt like breathing clean air. I stood there holding a piece of paper with numbers on it while my husband told me I was pollution. 2 days later he came home with a calm I had not seen in months, which should have scared me more than the yelling. He sat at our table and told me Solara had helped him see his path clearly, that she had shown him a spread, some kind of card thing, where his future opened up after he released old contracts. He used that word, contracts. He said our marriage contract had served its purpose and was now just a rope around his ankle. He took out printed divorce forms he had downloaded, blanks, filled in with neat handwriting, slid them across the table to me like he was passing salt. He told me he did not think I was a bad person. He said that more than once, like he was trying to convince himself, but that staying with me meant staying stuck, and he was done being stuck. He told me if I loved him, I would not want to keep him from his purpose. I sat there in my paint-stained t-shirt, looking at legal documents I had never seen before, and realized this was not a negotiation, it was an announcement. I said I was not signing anything right then. He said that was fine. He had already put a deposit down on a room in a house near Solara's studio. He would move out that night. Watching him pack was surreal in a very mundane way. He took the easy stuff, clothes, his drawing tablet, his notebook, a box of polished stones wrapped in socks. He did not touch the spice rack, the dishes, any of the heavy things we had picked together. It made the whole thing feel even more lopsided, like he was walking off with ideas and leaving me the objects. He hugged me once at the door, quick and awkward, telling me one last time that I would understand one day, then walked down the stairwell with 2 duffel bags, leaving the hallway echoing a little more than usual. The next few weeks were ugly in a quiet way. Nobody screamed, but I cried doing basic things, like taking out the trash or opening the closet. I kept going through his old mug collection and putting one back on the shelf by habit, then remembering. My work kept me afloat because at least there I had clear tasks. Draw this, fix that, send this by a deadline. Our mutual friends were confused. Everyone asked what had really happened, like there had to be cheating or some giant secret. I kept having to say, no, he left because someone with a foldable table and a stack of cards told him I was blocking his destiny. I thought once he moved out, the worst part was going to be the emotional mess. I figured he would do his thing, maybe get bored of it, maybe not, and we would just handle the boring legal divorce stuff eventually. Then about a month after he left, someone buzzed my intercom in the middle of the afternoon. I went down expecting a package. It was a man in a reflective vest holding a manila envelope. He asked for my name, had me sign on his little device, handed me the envelope, and left. I walked back up the stairs flipping it over, thinking it was probably more divorce paperwork. It was not. Inside was a small claims filing. Damon was suing me for emotional damages. Reading that on my hallway floor, with the envelope half crumpled in my hands, I did not even understand it at first. I had to go back and reread the section where he had written in his own words that my negativity, my refusal to support his spiritual journey, and my mocking of his beliefs had caused him intense distress and held him back from promotions and opportunities. He had put an actual number down, some random amount that apparently represented the price of his delayed destiny. He accused me of creating a hostile energetic environment in our home. That exact phrase was in there. I started laughing in that way where your throat tightens and it does not sound like a laugh. Then I cried. Then I laughed again. My brain kept stuttering on the idea that my ex-husband was trying to make a court order me to compensate him because his life did not look how he wanted and a psychic told him I was why. The court date was set for a few weeks later, at the local community courthouse by the transit hub, the same building where people go to argue about parking fines and landlord nonsense, and now apparently about blocked destinies. I live in an older walk-up building where everyone kind of knows everyone. My downstairs neighbor Gerard, an older man who collects old radios and leaves his door open when he is fixing them, had heard the intercom buzz and must have been curious. He knocked on my door later and asked if everything was okay. I ended up sitting on the floor leaning against my wall while he sat on my one good chair, reading through the papers with the same baffled look I had. He finally handed them back and said, very calmly, that this sounded ridiculous, but people filed ridiculous stuff all the time, and that judges where he had been for a landlord case did not humor nonsense for long. He told me to show up, bring proof of my side, and try not to let the words themselves scare me. He also told me about a free legal clinic that runs out of a side room at the public library, in the old reference section. I made an appointment there, sat at a plastic folding table under a warped world map while a volunteer attorney flipped through the pages. She did not roll her eyes the way I wanted, but her mouth did twitch a bit at phrases like soul mission. She explained that anyone can file a claim, but that did not mean they would win. To get money he would have to prove I had actually caused him measurable harm, like making him miss work, ruin his chances at something specific, not just hurt his feelings or disagree with his beliefs. She suggested I pull together bank statements, proof that I had not controlled his access to jobs, and any messages that showed he left of his own choice. Hearing someone put it in plain legal language calmed me a little, but I still felt like I was walking around in a parody. I also could not stop thinking about how much Solara had to be behind this, because Damon used phrases in the filing that were way too close to things I had heard him repeat after sessions, lines about claiming losses, about balancing energy, about standing up to those who dull your shine. I wanted to know exactly what she was feeding him that made weaponizing our breakup in court sound like a growth step. That curiosity is what pushed me into the next part, which is where the story got wider than just me. Update 3 weeks later. So, I did some digging and accidentally found out my situation is not even original in her world, which is equal parts depressing and useful. While I was getting my own folder together for court, with bank statements printed at the machines in the library, copies of bills, notes from the volunteer attorney, my cousin messaged me one afternoon. She works near the old tram depot and told me there was another big wellness-type fair happening there. She sent me a photo of the poster, and there was Solara's name right there, doing a live demonstration about clearing blocks to your higher path on the main little stage. I stared at the message for a while, going back and forth between wanting to throw my phone and wanting to be in the room. Eventually the second feeling won. I wanted to see her work a crowd, see how she talked when she was not behind a half-closed door with incense, maybe hear something that connected straight to what Damon was doing. So I went. The tram depot was full again, lines of tables, fabric, small speakers playing soft music. The floor still had faded stripes from when vehicles used to park on certain tracks. Kids were running between stalls. The air was thick with mixed smells, something fried from a food cart outside and about 12 different scents of smoke from various sticks and bowls. At one end there was a low platform with a microphone stand. A backdrop painted with stars and vague shapes. That was where Solara's name was on the program. I lingered near one of the big metal columns, keeping my hood up. When she came out, I recognized her even from a distance. She has that put-together vibe, layers of scarves, long cardigan, no shoes on stage, soft voice that carries. She started talking about how many people feel stuck, how sometimes the person closest to you does not really want you to grow because that would mean they have to move too. People around me nodded like this was deep. She asked for volunteers, had them sit on cushions, closed their eyes, then talked about what she saw when she read their field. Honestly, a lot of it was very generic. Stuff like you worry too much about what others think. Someone in your life has always told you to be realistic. If they reacted, she would narrow it. Standard cold reading stuff. The crowd loved it. A couple of people cried. The atmosphere around me was all yeah, this is exactly me. Then she said she wanted to tell a story about a client, a composite one. She stressed that, for privacy, but the way she described him might as well have had Damon's name printed above the stage. A man who had spent years in a job that did not appreciate him, in a marriage that kept him small, with a partner who made little jokes every time he tried to share something meaningful. She talked about how he was finally brave enough to leave that situation, how as soon as he did, things started opening for him. People around me were nodding like it was an inspiring example. I was standing there clenching my jaw so hard it hurt, listening to my life get boiled down into a motivational anecdote. There was a moment when our eyes met, just for a second. I had stepped forward without realizing it when she used a phrase I had heard Damon say in our kitchen, almost word for word, about my fear nodding up his path. She did not flinch. Her face stayed perfectly calm. She just shifted her gaze to someone else in the back. I suddenly felt like if I stayed any longer I would do something dramatic. So I left, walked past the food trucks outside, leaned against a light pole and stared at the old tram tracks, trying to decide if I was going to scream or laugh. On my way home I got a call from a number I did not know. I let it go to voicemail. Later, riding the tram back, I listened. It was Damon. His voice had that overly careful tone people get when they are rehearsing. He said he had heard from someone that I might have been at the fair, that Solara had sensed my energy in the room. He said he wanted me to know that was his space now, and that turning up without telling him could be seen as hostile. I stared at the scratched-up tram window and thought, imagine thinking your ex-wife attending a public event you advertised with posters is harassment. A couple of days later, another thing dropped into my lap from a completely different direction. In the lobby of my building we have this notice board with lost keys signs and carpet cleaning flyers. There was a new paper pinned up, simple black print, advertising a support group for people affected by controlling spiritual advisors, meeting in the rehearsal studio above the old single-screen cinema in the center of town. It mentioned manipulation, pressure to cut off family, financial strain, and had an email. I took a photo, went upstairs, stared at it for hours, then wrote to them. The group met one evening in this big room with a scuffed wooden floor, wall-length mirror on one side from some long-ago dance class, tape marks on the floor, a few folding chairs arranged in a rough circle, no incense, no candles, just people. The organizer was a woman named Lena, mid-40s, whose sister had emptied her savings for a healer before finally snapping out of it. She was tired of seeing people pick up the pieces alone, so she started this loose thing. There was a guy whose partner had sold his guitar collection to pay for retreats, a woman whose daughter had cut the whole family off at the advice of some guru, a younger person whose ex had made them go to mandatory meditation marathons. When it was my turn, I blurted out the whole chain, from the tram depot fare to the studio above the nail salon, to the divorce, to the lawsuit, to Solara using my life as a story on stage. I half expected someone to give me a look like this is too much. Instead people just nodded. One of them laughed in disbelief at the phrase hostile energetic environment. Not at me, at him. Someone mentioned that in their case, the advisor had actually encouraged legal action against family as a way to claim their power. That is when Lena suggested I keep anything that showed Solara had crossed that line, not for drama, but for consumer complaints. Another person, Priya, talked about filing a report with the state consumer office against a different psychic, because in our state there are rules. Like they have to state that it is for entertainment, they cannot give actual medical or legal directions. I had never once thought about that angle. I had been busy surviving my own mess. Around the same time, Damon started sending more voice messages instead of written texts. Apparently text was too fixed. According to him, I did not respond to most, but I saved them, because my lawyer brain, which I do not have, but the part of my brain that has been taught by the legal clinic, heard evidence. In one long ramble he talked about getting ready for court, about how this case was part of him drawing a line with people who doubted him. He mentioned that Solara had helped him list out every way I had held him back, had him assign numbers to each one, so he could see the scale clearly. He sounded proud of this exercise. I played that part twice, then took my phone back to the library clinic. The attorney at the clinic listened to the clip with her brows lifting. She pointed out that Damon had basically admitted his so-called advisor was helping him frame a legal claim, that this was not just spiritual chat anymore, this was unlicensed pseudo-legal coaching. She said that made my consumer complaint much stronger. We sat there side by side at the folding table filling out the online form, attaching sections of the contract, quotes from his audio. I stuck to facts, no calling her names, just dates, sums, behaviors. I hit submit and got the little generic thank you message, and then all I could do was wait on that front too. Court day came. The community courthouse is exactly as glamorous as you would expect. Low ceilings, a row of metal detectors at the entrance, vending machines humming, walls painted in that shade of off beige every public building seems to love. The small courtroom had plastic chairs for observers and 2 tables up front. I wore my one decent outfit that does not have paint on it, which unfortunately also reminds me of a job interview I did not get once, so that was a fun emotional layering. Damon was already there at the table when I walked in, with a slim stack of papers and his notebook. He looked tired and also wired, like he had been rehearsing in a mirror. Solara was sitting right behind him in the second row, hands folded, expression perfectly neutral, like she was at a recital and did not want to make it about her. Seeing her there made me even more grateful that Lena had come to sit on my side of the room. She gave me a tiny nod when our eyes met, just enough to remind me I was not walking into this alone. The judge was one of those people whose whole face says I have seen everything. He went through the formal first bits, case number, names, then asked Damon to explain his claim. Hearing my ex talk about me like I was an obstacle instead of a person was something. He spoke in that calm, rehearsed tone. He said my negativity had drained him, that my jokes about his sessions had undermined his self-belief, that my refusal to support his new path had delayed his career progress. He tried to link his missed promotion to my energy, which is wild because that happened before he even met Solara. Of course the judge keyed right in on that misalignment in the timeline. At first the judge just let him talk, then he started cutting in with questions, asking things like, did your wife prevent you from applying for positions? Did she forbid you from attending interviews? Did she control your transportation? Damon kept having to say no, because obviously I did not do any of that. The judge asked what specific lost wages he was claiming, like, did you have an offer in hand that she made you turn down? Damon had nothing concrete, just phrases like I felt I could not, or I was too drained, which might be valid feelings but are not legal proof of injury caused by a spouse. When it was my turn, the volunteer attorney stood with me. She had prepped me to stick to simple points, so that is what I did. I said I never stopped him from practicing his beliefs. I just raised concerns when shared money was being spent without agreement. I submitted the bank records showing the charges to Solara's business and how much that added up to. I pointed out that Damon was the one who first suggested divorce and left our home, not the other way around. I did not say anything about destiny. I stuck to receipts and dates. At one point, the judge asked Damon who had helped him calculate his damages, because he had this surprisingly specific number. Damon hesitated a little too long, then said his spiritual advisor had guided him through an exercise. The judge turned his head slowly and looked directly at Solara. He asked, in this very even tone, whether she was giving clients advice about legal claims. She spoke up just enough to say she was only helping them express their truth, not telling them what to do. She declined when he asked if she wanted to be sworn as a witness. That marked something in the air. You could feel it. In the end, the judge dismissed Damon's case. He said, basically, that pain from a marriage ending is real but not compensable in small claims this way, that the court does not calculate the price of missed destiny. Those were his actual words, which I have replayed in my head in both serious and funny ways. He also added a line about being careful about people who encourage turning every interpersonal conflict into a lawsuit. You could tell it was aimed more at Solara than at Damon. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like my legs were made of rubber but my spine was finally doing its job. Lena and I went to the vending machine in the hall, got terrible tea, and stood there in that ugly hallway just breathing, one disaster contained. Except a week later an email pinged my inbox from the state consumer office saying they were opening a file on Solara's business. Final update 6 months later. Half a year later, I am legally divorced, my ex's lawsuit is just a memory, and the woman who told him I was blocking his destiny has a very different set of rules to follow. My life looks nothing like what I imagined when I first sat in that night class next to a guy scribbling jokes in the margins of his sketchbook, but it also does not feel like I am living in someone else's script anymore. A few weeks after the court hearing, a man from the Consumer Affairs office called me. He had that tired but patient tone people in public jobs get. He thanked me for the complaint and then told me they had received others, not dozens, but enough to see a pattern. Other people described the same things I had: high fees, pressure to sign long-term contracts on the spot, encouragement to separate from family, hints that legal action against relatives would be empowering. He asked if I could send over everything I had: contracts, screenshots of Damon's notes where Solara's name was all over legal talk, the audio clips where Damon mentioned her helping him frame his claim. I emailed it all from my kitchen table while my kettle boiled in the background. He explained what they could actually do. They were not in the business of banning beliefs, but they did regulate how services are advertised. There are rules about not making health or legal promises, about having to state that readings are for guidance, not literal prediction. They can fine people, force them to change their materials, in extreme cases temporarily shut things down if someone refuses to comply. It was not the dramatic justice montage part of my brain had joked about with friends, but it was a real system, with real consequences, and it was moving, slowly, in her direction. On the personal side, Damon and I had one more official meeting, in a mediation room at the side building of the courthouse. The walls painted the same neutral color as the main one, square table, 2 chairs, a mediator who looked like she would rather be anywhere else. We split things like adults, furniture, whatever was in our joint account, our old DVD collection that nobody watches anymore. He looked worn down, his usually neat hair a bit unkempt. He barely mentioned Solara by name, just said things like my advisor, as if saying it out loud might trigger something. He did not bring up Destiny once, which honestly surprised me. Maybe the judge's comment had sunk in deeper than I thought. The divorce was finalized without more fireworks. He moved fully into that room in the shared house, near where the tram tracks bend behind the depot. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he is doing contract work now, some temp shifts, some side gigs, still seeing Solara but less often, maybe because her business took a hit. I found out about that part on a walk back from the print shop that does my fabric proofs. I had to pass the building where her old studio sat above the nail salon. The little painted eye sign was gone. Brown paper covered the windows. There was a city notice taped crookedly to the glass downstairs, the kind that mentions occupancy and usage permits. Later, at a support group meeting, Priya mentioned that according to public records, Solara had agreed to stop doing in-person group events for a while. She was allowed to do one-on-one sessions if she added big disclaimers and stopped calling anything she did legal masterminds or life contract resets. And she had been fined, not a fortune, but enough to sting. Around that time, Damon called me from an unknown number. I almost let it go, then picked up in the laundry room in my basement, with machines rumbling around me. He sounded smaller than he ever had. He said he had heard about the investigation, that some of her events were paused, that some people in his circle were angry and calling it an attack. He sounded a little lost. He told me he had not expected things to hit her that hard, that he thought the court thing would just make me see his words. I leaned against the cool metal of a washer and told him quietly that he was the one who dragged both of our private lives into a courtroom because someone told him it was part of his growth, and that when you turn real systems into tools for your personal story, other people get pulled in. He was quiet for a long time, then asked if I hated him. I told him, honestly, that I did not. I was too tired to keep that level of heat going forever, but that I do not trust him, and that is a bigger problem than hate, because trust is what you need if you are ever going to build anything together. There was a long pause. He said he understood, and for the first time in a year he did not end a conversation with something about the universe. He just said take care and hung up. As for me, I stayed in our apartment, at least for now. People kept asking if I was going to move, start over completely, maybe go rent somewhere brand new. I get why that sounds tempting, but the idea of packing every spoon and plant into boxes made my chest tight. Instead, I changed the space from the inside. I moved the couch. I took down the cheap framed print we had picked together at some sidewalk sale. I put up a massive corkboard I found at a salvage warehouse, covered it with my pattern drafts, printouts, sticky notes. That corner used to be where he kept a stack of spiritual books and a mat. Now it is mine, full of color swatches and random ideas. At one of our support group meetings in the rehearsal studio above the old cinema, Lena floated the idea that we do more than sit in that circle swapping stories, that maybe we could show up out in the world where people are first getting pulled in. There is a monthly community information fair in an old bus garage by the river. The city opens the doors, sets up tables, local orgs come talk about recycling, after school programs, tenant rights, all that. She suggested we be there too, not yelling at people about psychics, Just offering basic information about what is and is not okay when someone is charging you for spiritual services. So now, once a month, I stand behind a folding table between a booth about bike safety and one about volunteering at the animal shelter, with a small sign that just says something like, worried about a loved one and a spiritual advisor. We have simple handouts listing questions people can ask themselves. Things like, has someone told you your love for your family is a block you must cut to grow? Has anyone pressured you to sign up for expensive packages on the spot? Has anyone suggested suing relatives as part of your journey? It is low tech, no giant banners, just people stopping, taking a paper, sometimes sharing a little. Sometimes I mention my ex very briefly, that he once tried to put a number on the emotional damage my skepticism allegedly did to his destiny. Most people blink, then either laugh in that I cannot believe it way or get this look that says they actually can believe it, because they know someone on the edge of something similar. My freelance work, weirdly, has been steadier, not because the universe suddenly rewarded me, just because I had to get structured to keep my brain from spinning. I made myself a cheap cork calendar on the wall. I send follow-up emails I used to be too shy to send. I applied to 2 design residencies in an old post office building that has been turned into a shared studio space. One of them accepted me for a short stint. 3 mornings a week I go there, set my laptop up on a long table under high windows, and work with other people in the room who are just trying to make things. No destiny talk, just deadlines, and whether the printer downstairs is out of ink again. The last time I walked past the tram depot during a fair, I did not go in. I stood outside for a minute, watched people drift between tables, heard bits of music and sales pitches float out, then kept walking toward the bus garage where our information table was being set up. I helped unfold chairs, laid out our leaflets, taped our sign to the front of the table so it would not curl. It felt oddly grounding, like I was taking all the chaos of the past year and doing the smallest, most concrete possible thing with it, not burning anything down, not waging a crusade, just standing there with a stack of papers in a drafty former bus bay, letting people know that if someone ever tells them their entire life is ruining another person's destiny and that they should pay for that privilege, they are allowed to walk away, they are allowed to say no, and they definitely do not have to answer to it in court.